I'm Dan Rather, and this is 48 Hours.
I can't lie and say I'm not afraid to be in there. I mean, I know that I could lose my life any day in there.
For 7 years, Rich Brown has walked among some of the most violent prison inmates in the country.
What makes Lucasville different than any other prison in the state?
The mentality of the inmates, I'd say over 3/4 of the population, they start out at another prison, and then they end up at Lucasville. They couldn't conform to society's rules, and then they couldn't conform to the prison rules. And this is the last place for them to go. They have nothing to lose.
The 35-year-old officer can tell you what it's like.
I mean, it's hard to describe it. We've had 5 people murdered there. God knows how many inmates have been murdered in this prison.
But to really understand, you have to go inside. 48 Hours had the rare opportunity to go with him. Behind the bars, inside the cells, and into the life of a man whose job it is...
I'm not a counselor, I'm not a social worker.
...to maintain control in the middle of chaos.
I'm there to help my fellow officer out in time of need, and help an inmate out if somebody's trying to take his life. Going in 6, please.
Well, all these inmates have done something wrong in the prison system. This is administrative control.
Yeah.
So they're locked down most of the day.
Is this the way it is normally in this wing right now?
This is a daily thing, you know.
It's very clear this is not a controlled block.
Inmates try to intimidate you?
Yeah, they can intimidate me as far as fear goes, losing my life or being maimed, yeah.
Verbal intimidation is one thing.
The cells that you see with a piece of metal across the top, that's to keep them from throwing feces on us.
Health threats are another.
Have you ever had an inmate?
Oh, yes.
You've had an inmate throw feces on you?
You get so mad he's behind a bar and you get hit in the face with rotten feces. I won't lie, there's times if I had a gun in my hand, I'd probably blow the man's head off right then.
How many officers have had human waste thrown on you? That's virtually everybody in the room here.
Walk straight up, spit straight in your face.
Angry and afraid,
The worst thing is, we aren't even entitled to know who has AIDS.
these veteran corrections officers wanted to be heard.
Or anything else, TB.
We used to get in fights and get black eyes and busted lips, and we had to run in and break it up.
And they tell us that we can put rubber gloves on. You can't put on rubber gloves real quick and then go break up a fight.
I have children.
7 months approximately after I was hired into the institution, I come up positive for tuberculosis. And my son's a newborn. And evidently I had brought it home to him, and he'd contracted it also.
Less than an hour into Rich Brown's shift, there is a call of a man down.
Possibly somebody's getting hurt.
This one was a false alarm.
You know, this can happen 4 or 5 times a night. And it might be 2 or 3 out of the 4 be real.
With just a club and that alarm to protect themselves, this is a reminder.
How many have been assaulted?
I was 6 times in 1 year.
A reminder of the officer's greatest fear.
Well, my greatest fear is dying in there. I don't want to die in there.
Dying in there. That is exactly what happened to one of his fellow officers 3 years ago this week. The story of that cold-blooded murder, its legacy, and the families it touched when we return.
As it's been for the past year and a half, their daily trip takes them 109 miles.
Yep, some of the boys coming off a shift.
Yep. Past the state penitentiary at Lucasville, where one of America's deadliest prison riots changed the Vallandighams' lives forever.
Full-scale riot broke out here today. At least 7 guards have been injured and an unknown number of guards have been taken prisoner.
Inmates upset with overcrowding and a host of other problems at the maximum security prison already were at a boiling point.
They want to force the Muslims to take tuberculosis tests, which is against our religion.
A dispute over TB testing finally triggered the violence.
We are not going to give up. We are going to remain no matter what they put on us. If we die, we die.
Rioters killed 9 inmates and 1 guard.
The body of correctional officer Robert R. Vallandigham was recovered.
The guard was the Vallandigham son, Bob. When did you find out that he'd been killed?
Thursday morning.
Was this the last picture you have of him?
Just about the last one.
He was 40 years old, married, and had a grown son.
So see, he grew into his ears. He always worried about his ears.
See? Oh, my.
You don't know until a child of yours is kidnapped and brutalized and murdered. You don't know how it feels. I mean, it's always there. It never goes away.
Well, we got about 40 miles out of Cincinnati, probably.
I think we had kind of a special relationship with Bob.
It is that love that brings them each day.
He was our next door neighbor. He was our friend. He was our son.
To this Cincinnati courtroom, to the latest trial stemming from the riot.
Without any doubt, this riot was planned.
That of 33-year-old inmate Carlos Sanders.
Who's pulling all these strings in the background? Well, I submit to you, certainly it's Carlos Sanders.
Sanders was the leader of the Muslim group that started the disturbance, which quickly engulfed 400 inmates in one wing of the prison.
It was a Muslim riot, and they all looked to him.
Sanders is charged with being the mastermind behind the riot and with ordering Bob Vallandingham's execution.
An object was applied to Mr. Vallandingham's neck to cause this type of injury.
Ligature strangulation, and strangled till he was dead.
Today, 5 weeks into their 5th trial, and after attending more than a year of court proceedings, the Vallandinghams have learned many details about the riot and about their son's murder. But they still don't have the answer to the one question they now consider crucial.
We don't know why Bob was chosen. And I guess that's the thing that we really would like to know.
There was only one time that I was directly involved before the death of Mr. Vallandingham.
You take a lot of notes. What are those notes for?
Well, one thing, I compare what some of them say, and some of the stories don't jive. And you think, okay, and then you keep listening to see who's going to tell the same story.
It's that important to you to understand every single thing that you possibly can find out about yourself.
Especially if we find out something basic about Bob, you know.
You weren't in any meetings, correct?
Before his murder?
Before his murder.
I just don't want to know the nitty-gritty details. I don't want to know all that.
Unlike her in-laws, Bob's wife, Peggy, has never set foot in the courtroom.
You know, that's their way of dealing with their grief and their loss. And this is my way of dealing with my grief and my loss.
The couple was married for 20 years.
It's still there, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of him. But I guess maybe I'm just not strong enough to go to the trials and things.
You don't have to do it.
No, you don't have to.
No, we do.
Well, for Bob's sake, yeah.
Did you know a correctional officer by the name of Bob Vallandingham?
Yes, sir.
Mike Hensley was one of the 7 guards who survived the 11-day siege.
He serves inmates running everywhere. It's just mayhem going on out there.
Correction officers shot this video 2 months after the riot ended.
See any help coming in the hallway at this point in the corridor?
Nothing but inmates.
At some point, are you discovered in the stairwell?
Yes, sir.
What did the inmates do next?
Knocked the wall in. After about the 3rd hit, it was on the floor. We had ball bats, a chain, weight bars. They tied my hands and my feet up with a telephone cord. Then when I was secure, they moved me to L6.
And do you know a particular inmate that was in charge of that block?
Carlos Sanders.
He seems like he's holding a little back.
He's like Bob was.
In what way?
He's very macho type person, and he has to stay on top of it. And
you're certain that inmate Sanders was present when you were told Vallandingham had been killed?
Am I certain?
Yes.
Yes, sir. They just told me that it wasn't them that killed Officer Vallandingham, it was the state, because they refused to negotiate.
So you're not guilty of kidnapping either. Is that what you're telling ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Putting my hand on anyone? No, I'm not guilty of kidnapping anyone.
I haven't said putting your hand on anyone.
if you are in on the planning of a murder, then you're as guilty as the person that did the actual murder. I think they should decide he's guilty.
How are you going to feel if Carlos Sanders is not convicted?
I'll be very disappointed.
We, the jury, the issue join. Find the defendant, Carlos Sanders, also known as Sadiq Abdullah Hassan, not guilty of felonious assault on Larry Dodson by means of a bludgeon.
When they started giving him not guilty at first, I thought, oh my.
We, the jury, the issue join. Find the defendant, Carlos Sanders, also known as Sadiq Abdullah Hassan, guilty of the aggravated murder of Robert Vallandigham during the kidnapping of Robert Vallandigham.
It's the verdict the Vallandighams have prayed for.
What about the next step?
Just hope they can follow through and give him the death penalty.
I want it to be the death penalty.
Not, they say, out of vengeance, but simply because going back to prison is not punishment enough for Carlos Sanders.
If they find him guilty of killing someone and they give him life instead of the death penalty, they're still out in the population in the prisons so that they can kill somebody again.
I know this is very disconcerting, but the second hearing, you're going to determine whether or not that man lives or dies.
Carlos Sanders has spent most of his life behind bars. He was in Lucasville for armed robbery. Bob Vallandigham had been working there as a corrections officer for just 2 years. Their lives crossed that April day 3 years ago, and now their families face a day of reckoning.
They have a verdict.
You'll be there. Plus,
Can what happened 3 years ago, can it happen again?
have conditions at Lucasville improved? These officers and their answers when we return. Would you want a prison in your backyard? A lot of communities do. In Florida alone, 15 towns are so eager to build prisons, they're on a waiting list, waiting for an industry that will bring with it good-paying jobs. Guards in Lucasville, for example, make up to $28,000 a year. But as many there tell us, a prison job can be both a blessing and a curse.
My greatest fear is dying in there. I don't want to die in there.
What has changed at Lucasville Prison since the murder of corrections officer Bob Vallandigham? Can what happened 3 years ago, can it happen again?
It could have happened every day since 1972, since the place opened. Every single day it could have happened anywhere in the prison.
I believe this to be one of the safest, most secure, maximum security prisons in the country.
Warden Terry Collins was called in to clean up Lucasville after the riots.
We've done a lot of security renovations here in the past year, reconstruction of cell blocks, put in block controls, quarter controls.
They put a lot of high-tech stuff in there. It's just
more cosmetic.
You're still out there in the middle of it, 1 on 10, 20, 30, 40 at a time.
The threat's there all the time. Where you're at, there's so many.
You have mass movement for recreation. You have mass movement for library, legal services. You have mass movement for medical needs. And you have mass movement for child.
We have a group coming in.
Okay.
Anytime they want you, they got you.
Anytime they want you, they got you?
Yeah, anytime.
I feel safer walking down the corridors here than I do walking around in most large cities.
And the warden says the officers are guarding only half as many inmates as they did before the riots.
If they do what they're supposed to do, if they follow the procedures that we have written, then all of us will be okay. If they don't, all of us got a major problem.
You can pull that out of your window.
But officers say sometimes they have a problem when they follow the rules.
We got administrative rules and regulations that tell us in black and white we're allowed to use force to enforce the rules and regulations. But if an officer does, he can be under scrutiny.
That officer's actions are reviewed by a use of force committee.
When I go in there and break up a fight, I feel I did my job. I felt I saved this man from getting injured. I felt I stopped something from being escalated. I come to work the next day. You have to go see the use of force committee. We don't think this was totally necessary. Why was this man injured this way? Well, I can't tell you what happened because there's 6 of us there. We're all thrashing around the floor. We're hitting our heads on the wall. They're not talking about the officers that got injured. They're talking about these 2 inmates. And this right here will prevent a lot of officers from helping out other officers or from doing their job because I don't want to be in that. I don't want to be scrutinized. I don't want to be under that lamp. I don't want to be sued. That's all you hear.
You have to really have a love for this job to spend that much time in there.
See you tomorrow, kid. It's like taking a bottle of aspirin coming out here.
Why are you a corrections officer? The money. I mean, at one time I thought I could make a career out of it, but now it's to support my family.
You may have kids.
Yes. What we call this is a fast food and welfare county. So there's hardly any income down here, any jobs. I should probably go quit this job, go to welfare, and try to get into college and start over again with my life, you know, but I guess some of my pride is in my way.
It's not an easy job, but I think we all knew that when we took the jobs, too.
WPAY with Colin Ray, and I think about you.
I still now think, well, something happened to the car. Well, I'll ask Bob to get on.
I think about. In fact, we at one of the trials, and on the way back, the car started acting funny, and he said, "When we get home, I'm going to get Bob." No, I'm not.
WPAY, the Tri-State News Leader, teaming up to give you the most up-to-date news stories.
For Wanda and Eldon Vallandingham, 1.5 years of courtroom vigils are almost over.
A Cincinnati jury.
Today, Lucasville Prison riot leader Carlos Sanders learns if he's going to be executed or serve life in prison for the murder of the Vallandingham son. The Vallandinghams have been here every single day. Is there anything you would say to them?
Hopefully, in the end, the truth will manifest itself that I didn't play the role that they think I played in their son's death.
They think you ordered it?
Yes.
I firmly believe he's guilty.
He's been found guilty.
Right.
What do you want the sentence to be?
I want it to be the death penalty.
My mother is his mother, and his father is my father.
Catherine Sanders is in court today, too, desperate to convince the jury her brother does not deserve to die.
To me, he is my little brother. He's loving, sensitive to my feelings.
I feel for his sister. She can't help what her brother did. I'm sure that she probably feels for us.
My heart goes out to them, you know. You're in my prayers, and I hope that I'm in yours.
Ms. Sanders, you may leave. Thank you very much.
You're not curious as to how this trial is going?
All I care about is that he gets the death penalty.
These lawyers are permitted to give you a closing argument at this time.
You've already found him guilty of is that he committed an aggravated murder during the course of the kidnapping of Bob Vallandingham.
There has not been one indication of any misconduct from 1993 to today.
That's not an issue anymore. He's the one. He did it.
Bob Vallandingham is killed, and his body is carried out and it's dumped out on that yard, just like someone would take out the trash.
Bob Vallandingham stands in front of you and asks for justice.
Bob Vallandingham can't be here to ask you for justice.
So a lot of talk today about justice. Are you confident that justice will be served here?
It depends on how one sees it.
Justice is making for sure when somebody commits a murder that they have to pay for it.
You do have in your hands.
I ask for a death sentence.
I believe there's only one conclusion you can reach.
The life or death of this man.
He's a strong believer that Allah, Most High, will bring him through this.
Return the verdict that shows that Bob's life was not cheap.
Consider all of the evidence.
If it weren't for God, I think we'd both have our minds lost.
In fairness and mercy.
It's kind of sad in a way, you know, because I thought, what are they going to do when all the trials are over with, you know? And then they have time to really sit down and really think about everything that's happened and everything they've heard in the court.
After nearly 6 hours,
They have a verdict. The jury has arrived.
We, the jury, do find that the aggravating circumstances which the defendant, Carlos Sanders, also known as Sadiq Abdullah Hassan, was found guilty of committing, that is, the killing was done while a prisoner in a detention facility.
I was pretty afraid, though, for a while.
We therefore recommend that the sentence of death be imposed on the defendant, signed by all 12 jurors.
The jury recommended that you should die in Ohio. What's your reaction to that?
That's the decision.
do you think the outcome would have been different if the conditions in the prison had been admitted as evidence?
That is always a possibility.
Sir, are you ready to face death if it comes to that?
Every social will face death.
This wasn't really a surprise, was it?
Maybe this is what God wants. I don't know. And I always pray, thy will be done, not mine. So I figured that when a verdict comes in, that it has to be what he wanted.
I'm just as angry as I was that day.
Will you be able to go back to normal?
How could it be normal when Bob was a normal part of our everyday life.
Why him? That's the question I'd love to have answered. I don't think it ever will be.
Bob Bellandingham was able to get one last message to his parents. He and an inmate had made a promise. If one of them died during the riot, the other would contact the survivor's family. The inmate kept his word. 2 months after Bellandingham's death, the inmate passed on a letter to the officer's parents. The message, quote, "Tell my wife that I cherish her. Tell my son I'm proud of him and love him. Tell my parents not to worry because I'm all right now." End quote. Now stay with us.